Well, good afternoon. This is Mike Fowle from the National Weather Service, and I'm here with Chad Hahn. It's great to be chatting with everybody this afternoon, obviously, and we would have preferred to be doing this in person if possible, but we'll do the best we can and within the circumstances. So, yeah, we're going to present two things for you today. One, I'm going to start off the presentation today, and what I'm going to cover is a review of the August 10th, 2020 Midwest derecho. Obviously, one of the highest impact events we've seen, at least in terms of a thunderstorm or convective event, gosh, in probably the last 10 or 20 years, maybe more than that. The last one probably with any similar type impact was probably the Parkersburg tornado. So I'm going to start by covering a review of that event. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Chad. And we may have a short break in between the presentation here. I'll turn it over to Chad, and then he's going to cover some of the specialized weather service products and services that we offer. So with that in mind, I guess I'll go ahead and kick it off. Chad, is there anything offhand that you wanted to mention?
Nope, you're good to go, sir.
And Mike, this is John. We have a couple people chiming in, and I'm seeing it now too. The bottom of your presentation is cut off, like mid-logo for your NOAA and National Weather Service logos. You previously had it on like a little reduced view, and you could see it. So
yeah. Let me try to, yeah, I'm sharing via, is it any better what if I go to the next slide? Are you still seeing that cut off, John?
Yeah, it cuts off at nearly the 60 mile wide.
Let me try, I'm going to do just to try to get this all in there. Let me see if I can adjust this. I'm going to stop sharing here momentarily, and let me try a different version here. I'm going to try a different version to share, and let's try the entire screen once. Let's try that. Is that any better, John?
No, it's not. For some reason, earlier when you did it in PowerPoint, it looked fine. And maybe you had it in PowerPoint or Sheets, a different view. For right now, it's still cut off.
Yeah, it looks like the Zoom is highlighting the whole. I can't adjust the. It looks like the screen there. Well, I apologize, folks, for that. Yeah, we're using Google Slides, so not PowerPoint. So it's difficult for me to adjust that unless I put it in the other view mode, and that's going to probably look a little silly. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, the only thing I think we could try, if it's really distracting folks, would be to pop this over to Chad's view. You could try to make Chad a presenter, John. I don't want to take up too much time here. And then I could just do a quick next slide, and I think Chad would know when to flip it. We could try that. That's the only other thing if it's very distracting. I can't see anything else I can really do here to adjust.
Nope, I understand completely. If Chad wants to give that a shot, he's a co-host. Otherwise, I think we can make it through, and your slides will be available afterwards if people want to go through. But
very good.
Yeah,
well, Chad, I stopped presenting. If you wanted to try to take it over, you could see if it'll work for you.
How's that?
Looks great.
All right, it must be operator error on my end. So apologize, folks. So yeah, we'll just do it this way. I think this will work just fine. So apologize for that confusion. So you can go to the next slide, Chad. All right, so what I thought I'd start doing is just kind of define the term derecho, and we'll kind of start with a few basic things here. It's kind of interesting. If you were to go back a few months ago and you would have mentioned this term, you probably would have got some interesting expressions off people's faces. But you know how things go like this, where once something like this occurs, you know, it becomes part of the common vernacular, and that's definitely the case here as well. There's even T-shirts, I think, now that I survived the derecho, right? So, so basically, what is a derecho? The meteorological definition is essentially a widespread straight-line windstorm that's produced by a complex or line of thunderstorms. That's kind of the basic definition. And the winds that occur from a derecho that are particularly damaging are created from downbursts, and that's what causes the damage. And an easy way to visualize that is from the grain bins there on the left side. Notice how they're kind of pushed down, right? It looks like something came from above and basically punched them in, and that's from the downburst from these winds. And that's probably the easiest way to visualize that. Again, the air is coming down. Think of a tornado. A tornado is going to have more lateral winds or uplift. So that's really the difference between, say, a derecho and a tornado. And the other really important criteria is that it needs to have a nearly continuous damage path over a swath of at least 400 miles long by 60 miles wide. So it has to have, again, a pretty big damage footprint. And we'll go over some of the specifics here in this event here momentarily. So, okay, next slide, Chad. I'll give you a quick history lesson. So where did this word come from, derecho? It's actually a Spanish word, and it was interpreted as straight ahead or direct. And essentially it was chosen many years ago to help discriminate between straight line wind damage and wind damage caused from tornadoes. As we saw in this event, obviously very damaging. So it's easy to confuse the two. So that's the reason that this term came out, was to differentiate the two. The term actually has roots right here in Iowa, believe it or not. It was initially identified by a professor named Gustavus Heinrich, who was a University of Iowa physics professor, and he termed this derecho back in 1877. So way back in 1877. So again, this is not a new term. It's new in terms of the the common verbiage or the common language. But again, it has elements way back in the 1870s. Just kind of a quick aside, he was also the first state climatologist in the country, Gustavus Heinrich. And so Iowa has a long line of being important in terms of weather and climate. If you're interested in learning more about derechos, I put a quick link there. We'll share this presentation. The Storm Prediction Center has a really nice web page about other historical events, imagery. It's a really good page. So I will reference you to that link if you want to learn more. Okay, next slide, Chad. So getting to the actual radar evolution of this event, again on August 10th, this is kind of a really interesting image put together, and this is courtesy of Matt Friedland. He's one of the forecasters at our counterpart office at the NWS in Chicago. And basically what this is essentially a 1 hour time lapse of the event. So a screen capture essentially from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. of what the radar signature looked like. And this really, I believe, gives a nice depiction on kind of how this evolved. So you can see that it began across far northeastern Nebraska, intensified as it moved eastward across the Missouri River, around 10 a.m. Really started to intensify in that 11 a.m. time frame on the north side of Des Moines, impacted the Ames area, and then really just became its peak intensity along that US Highway 30 corridor from basically Marshalltown, Cedar Rapids, and then of course continued all the way east to the Quad Cities and then into Illinois. And then, as you can see, continued all the way into Indiana, Michigan, and before dissipating there in Ohio. You can see there in that little outline there, the worst damage that we had was essentially across the central and east central corridor there of Iowa. That's where some of the worst damage occurred. The other thing is just kind of notice the evolution. One of the radar characteristics, very common, and this was textbook, is kind of the bowing shape, right? Kind of like, imagine like a bow and arrow, that bowing shape that you see, that's a very strong indication that you're getting these straight line winds occurring with this sort of an event. And then the other thing, notice kind of how it expands. It starts kind of compact and then it gradually expands. I like to in a common term, think of it like a bucket of water. You dump a bucket of water on the ground, starts off small, and then, as we call here, a kind of a scientific term, but the cold pool basically expands out as the event, in this case, moved to the east. So you can see the north-south extent expanded as it moved into Illinois. So that's kind of a hour by hour. Now, next slide, Chad, we can kind of take a look at this from a looping perspective, and hopefully this will come across okay. This will loop a few times. And again, keep an eye out for that kind of bowing structure that you see, kind of that arc or bow out on the leading edge. And also look at the speed of this system. This was moving at 50 to 60 miles per hour through much of its lifespan. And that's obviously not going to give folks a lot of time to get prepared. If you're waiting for it to be on top of you, that's going to be too late. Unfortunately, with these events, the predictability is often low. And in this case, again, it really wasn't until the storms got going in Nebraska early that morning that we really had an inkling that things were going to get bad. At times you get a little better predictability, but in this case, again, it really wasn't until, again, that the morning hours on that day that we really started to get the, this could be bad. And of course, it ended up being even worse than I think a lot of us thought. Okay, next slide. So was the criteria met? So if you recall in that initial slide there's some pretty specific criteria. This was courtesy of the Storm Prediction Center. You can see the genesis area there across northern Nebraska, across Iowa, and then ending again across western Ohio. The derecho itself from start point to end point was over 700 miles, approximately 770 miles, and it made that trek in 14 hours. So again, the average speed, 55 miles per hour. And again, so it's cruising. If you're thinking about getting in your car, that's a pretty steady state drive to make that run all the way across the Midwest. Again, right through the heart of the Corn Belt, of course. And then also plotted there are the damage or the storm reports that we received that day. And again, that peak intensity right across central Iowa, east central Iowa, and again, continued into Illinois and Indiana. But again, worst segment of the storm right where we didn't want it, right across the heartland there. Okay, next slide. So let's get into the wind gust reports in this event. And this is one of the features that really made this event extreme. So we'll look at a couple things. Let's start with the table on the right-hand side there. These were some of the measured wind gusts that were reported from this event. So the winner, Atkins, over there in east central Iowa, 126 mile per hour peak gust measured near Midway, 112. LeGrand, right there on Highway 30, 106. Hiawatha, there near Cedar Rapids, 100. So quite a number of 100 plus mile per hour measured gusts. That's extraordinary. Notice there, those have a little asterisk by that. The reason that's denoted is those are considered unofficial observations. The reason being is they are not a National Weather Service calibrated instrument. So again, it can't be used for an official purpose per se, but again, in this case, we feel they were very representative. Some of the official observations from this event: Marshalltown, 99 miles per hour at the airport, Davenport Airport, 87, Iowa City Airport, 82 miles per hour, and then the Des Moines Airport, kind of on the southern fringe there, 75. You'll notice two other airports that are missing, Ames, are notable ones that are missing, Ames and Cedar Rapids. Those were unfortunately lost due to power outages and or comms failures. I would have really liked to have seen what Cedar Rapids Airport would have reported. Probably would have been extreme. As a side note, even the Marshalltown report of 99, that was from we actually called into the system to get that 99, and shortly after we called in, the system was knocked offline. So again, it would have been great to have both of those, the full observation, but again, unfortunately, the data was lost. But the graphic on the left there really gives perhaps a better depiction of the spatial extent of the peak winds. The blue there, anywhere denoted in the light blue shading there in the map, that's 60 to 70 mile per hour winds. Again, these are estimates, but we're pretty confident in those estimates. The first shade of light green is 70 to 80. The dark green, 80 to 100. So that's getting into the really damaging winds. And then the yellow or orange and red, I guess yellowish orange and red, those are winds over 100 to 120. And then the red is 120 plus. So pretty extraordinary span of winds across, again, right across the state of Iowa, getting the worst of that. And then there were a number of tornadoes as well. We'll get to that in a moment. So again, really extreme. This is on the extreme side, of course, for any sort of convective event or thunderstorm event. Okay, next slide. Sorry, to put that in context. So how would we put that in context? That area there in the kind of in the light or in the dark green, you can consider that basically, and maybe an easier term, as an EF1 plus tornado, so at least an EF1 strength. And that would have been an EF1 tornado, essentially 200 miles long by 40 miles wide. So if you think about that for a moment, I mean, think of most tornadoes. They're generally a few miles long, and most tornadoes are only a couple hundred yards wide. This would have been a tornado 200 miles long by 40 miles wide. That's pretty incredible. So yeah, that just puts it maybe in a little better context. So, okay, now next slide, Chad. Zooming in a little bit, just another way to look at this. So this is kind of zoomed in more to Iowa again. You can kind of see Des Moines and Iowa City and Cedar Rapids there labeled. So how large was this aerial extent of winds? These were some kind of rough calculations, but we figured that, this is across Iowa, the winds that exceeded 80 miles per hour covered an area almost 8,500 square miles. The winds over 100 miles per hour covered almost 2,500 square miles, and the winds over 120 were about 195, which is smaller, but that's still, I mean, 120 miles per hour is obviously extreme. To again put that in perspective, the state of New Hampshire is about 9,000 square miles, so roughly the 80 mile per hour wind swath was about the size of New Hampshire. Pretty incredible. And the 100 mile per hour winds was greater than the size of the state of Delaware. So again, that puts it in perspective just how large of a damage area this really was. Okay, next slide. Again, getting back to this tornadoes, and I did want to mention this for a couple reasons. One is we did have 5 confirmed tornadoes in this event. One of those was an EF1, and the other 4 were what we call EFUs, or EF unknowns. Basically, it didn't hit, when we say EF unknown, it means it didn't hit one of our formal damage indicators. And of those tornadoes, 3 of those were in Marshall County, 1 was in Tama County, and then 1 was in Lynn County. Most of these were found via some satellite. We actually have satellites now in space, our polar orbiters, that get down to about 1 meter resolution. So it's pretty interesting. You can see things on satellite now that, again, even 10 years ago, you could never see. We also had a team come up from the National Severe Storms Laboratory from Oklahoma, and they actually flew drones or UAVs over a number of these areas, and they also found these damage paths that were caused from tornadoes. The one thing I want to reiterate, although there were tornadoes, actually the damage with these were really no worse than the straight line winds, and in some cases, they probably were less in magnitude than some of the downburst winds from the derecho. So although we did document a number of these, this was not, again, the big deal or the big event here. It was the straight line winds that caused all the damage, not the tornadoes. Okay, next slide, Chad. So we talked about the magnitude was extreme. Now next is the duration of the winds. And this is courtesy of my counterpart in the Quad Cities, Ray Wolf. Shared this image. This is from again, an unofficial observation from North Liberty. Again, the peak wind you can see there was 98 miles per hour. But basically on the y-axis there, you have the wind speed in miles per hour. On the x-axis there, you have time. And you can see the wind trace there. And you can see right as we get to about 12:30 p.m. local time is where the derecho impacts North Liberty. And you can see the winds jump up from 20 to 30 miles per hour all the way up to our severe criteria, as many of you know, is 58 miles per hour, 50 knots. And then I also denoted there in that purple dashed line the 90 mile per hour threshold. So not only were the winds extreme, again, 98 miles per hour peak gusts, the really significant portion here is the duration of those winds. We had over an hour from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. that the winds were above 58 miles per hour. And for most of that time, they were actually above 70, if not 80 miles per hour for an hour. And that, if you've seen some of the pictures, and there's actually some really good YouTube videos that are too long to show in this kind of a presentation, but these pulses of winds and the duration of the wind, you could just see how it damaged trees, how it would have damaged structures and power poles. These pulses of wind over an hour just damaged things considerably. Again, most events, the winds last for maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes. to get something an hour is really incredible, and again, especially at that magnitude, above 80 miles per hour with peaks near 100 are pretty incredible. So again, not only was the magnitude extreme, but the duration was the extreme. And you know, people often term this as a land hurricane. I don't love that term, just because again, the formation processes, of course, are different than a hurricane. But really, in terms of the damage, it was very hurricane-like, because that's what you'll see in a hurricane, a very long-lived wind signature. So again, I think this really drove that point home very nicely. Okay, next slide. So getting into the impacts now here for the last 10 minutes or so. What's plotted here, this is courtesy of the USDA, U.S. Department of Ag. In the across Iowa there, the dark green shading is kind of what they've termed the major corn belt or major corn area. The light green there being the minor corn area. And obviously this derecho tracked right across kind of the heart of the corn belt, as we well know, which was responsible for all the damage that we saw, again, starting across, again, eastern Nebraska, and then again, continuing right across Iowa into Illinois, Indiana. So again, right through the area of the corn area. Again, lots, if not damaged, much of it completely destroyed. Okay, next slide, Chad. So I wanted to highlight this with a couple pictures. So two pictures, one courtesy of HySPLIT Aggie on the left there, and the right from Lisa Schmitz. We'll start with the image on the right. And this image we would see, I would say not often, but I've seen this a number of times in my career, the image there from Lisa, where you see the corn is laid down. There's some stalks that are still standing. That's probably, in essence, 80 mile per hour winds, maybe a little bit stronger than that. That's still pretty extreme. That's going to be a world of hurt, obviously, if you're trying to harvest that. You're not going to get much of that up. In small areas, we see this, again, once or twice a year, it seems like, across the state. What made it unique was the widespread extent of that kind of damage in Lisa's photos. But really, the image that was burned into my mind is some of these images like we see from KIP. I've been doing this for, gosh, almost 20 years now, and I don't think I've ever seen corn laid down that flat where there's almost no stalks standing. And this played out over square mile after square mile, section after section, where we saw the corn essentially, as someone mentioned, it looked like it was steamrolled. And I agree, that's what it looks like. There's nothing that's standing. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that. And I think that was, again, due to the combination of not only the magnitude, but I really think it was the duration of the wind that really flattened that corn down. And it's heartbreaking to see when you see field upon field like that. Really, again, devastating imagery all across, much of that US 30 corridor. So again, we saw that play over and over. So just shows the extreme nature of this event. Okay, next slide. This is probably going to be a little bit hard to see, so you might have to squint a little bit here. Again, if you download this presentation, you'll be able to see it a bit better. Basically, this is again another image from space. This is one of our polar orbiters, and this is basically 100-meter resolution. And that area highlighted in yellow, that's kind of the main damage footprint that we saw from the ag perspective. And basically, what this is a time lapse. So prior to the derecho, July 28th, and then after the derecho on August 11th. And what you can see there, even from several thousand miles in space, you can see the damage from the crops. And basically what happens, of course, is the leaves, as damage happens to crops, the bottom part of the leaf shows up and it has a different reflectance than the other part of the leaf. So it shows up, again, on satellite, again, way up in space. So to be able to see this from space is a pretty extraordinary feat. So again, just highlighting the extreme nature of this event. Okay, next slide. And then the other part of the component here that really stood out was the power outages. And this was an image courtesy of poweroutage.us page. They do a nice job tracking this. This is just one snapshot. I'm not sure if this was the worst in the event, but basically this was from 2/14, kind of right as the event exited the state. The estimate here was over 419,000 customers, so not people, but customers without power across the state. Obviously, the magnitude, the duration we talked about, but of course, what made this portion, the power outage portion, that much more devastating is it hit some of the big population centers of the state. You know, starting from the Des Moines Ames corridor to Marshalltown, of course, the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City area, and then of course right into the Quad Cities. So not only was it the magnitude, but right through the heart of the population centers. And so I don't know if I think we've been trying to figure out, is this a record? We believe it's probably a record number for power outages. Again, I don't know if there's an official stat out there anywhere, but if it's not, it's got to be in the top two. I would say I can't think of an event where it'd be something like this. Maybe an ice storm, perhaps, way back when. But yeah, this is pretty extraordinary in terms of the number of power outages, and again, lasted for weeks. Another time lapse. This is also from space. This is kind of one of those kind of neato. Again, this is a before and after. And again, this is one of our newer satellite products. And what you can see is basically the lights prior to the derecho, and then the lights after the derecho went through. And you can see that corridor, basically that U.S. Highway 30 corridor, basically goes dark the day after the derecho moves through. And then by all the hard work from the line crews, you can see that the restoration of the power in those little cities and towns gradually start to light back up. So kind of just another way to look at things. It's kind of in a neat way. So again, seeing these things from space just again speaks to the significant magnitude of this event. Okay, next slide. And then finally getting to just some of the statistical impacts. Unfortunately, we did have 4 fatalities in this derecho. 3 of those did occur in Iowa. You hate to see that. I mean, things can be rebuilt, but obviously loss of life is the first and foremost what we want to prevent. There were also numerous injuries, some serious, but looking back at the damage and the extent of the damage, I consider ourselves fortunate here that it wasn't worse. And I think that's a testament to the partnership we have with all you folks in the emergency management community, as well as the media, trying to get the word out there that this was going to be bad. And I hope people took the right response. We're always looking for ways to improve, but again, it could have been a lot worse than that. Again, you hate to see any loss of life, but again, I think there were lots of successes in this event as well. Throughout the event, again, not just in Iowa, this is for the extent, 1 million homes and businesses without power across multiple states, at least 8,000 homes and businesses damaged. That's probably a low estimate. Destroyed or heavily damaged, it's probably more than 10,000, to be honest, but that was just some of the early numbers we had. Another interesting aspect, semis and actually some cars blown off the road in this event. That might be an opportunity for us to work together on how to message that for those folks, and that was responsible for some of the injuries as well, drivers that were blown off the road. And this was already deemed a $1 billion disaster. Yes, B is in billion. Dollar disaster, probably a multi-billion-dollar disaster when it's all said and done. And there's just the example of the events. This is in 2020. Gosh, this year we even have more than a dirty dozen. We have $16 billion events in 2020. Everything from tornadoes, fires, drought, hail, of course the hurricanes, and there we are right in the center there. Our derecho event made it to the $1 billion disaster. Not necessarily a feather you want in your cap, but there it is. I think, Chad, let's do real quick the historical perspective. And I wanted to just kind of clear this up. I think there was maybe a little bit of misinformation about this. Actually, a derecho, again, going back to that earlier criteria I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, actually impacts a portion of Iowa about once every 2 years, believe it or not. So while not something you see, every week, these are not actually all that uncommon. A derecho, again, impacting a portion of Iowa. However, what made August 10th a much more extreme event was the magnitude, the intensity, and then, of course, the impacts. In terms of the intensity, this is probably a once in a decade, maybe once in 20-year type event. We've seen other derechos that actually had those wind speeds, over 100 to that 120, 130 range. One of them is listed right there below, June 29th, 1998. For those that have been here a long time, that was one where we had some extreme damage as well. But really what I think made this event unique was the impact. Again, just because it hit the main population corridors, the extent of the crop damage, the power outages. This is probably a once or twice in a lifetime sort of an event when you see it, even in terms of derechos. So I would say once in every 25 to 50 years do we see something that maybe rivals this. So again, while not, derechos themselves are not all that uncommon, one of this intensity is fairly uncommon. And again, next slide, Chad, I'll show you just two examples. So again, just to kind of reiterate that fact, this is the June 29th, 1998 derecho. You can see the track of this one. Actually not, maybe a little more from northwest to southeast, but again, impacting Des Moines. It kind of missed the Cedar Rapids area in this case, maybe more of an Iowa City issue. But again, really extreme winds with that event. And then we also had kind of this crisscrossing derecho back on the 10th and 11th of July of 2011. And if you kind of look at that radar loop at the bottom there, you can kind of see how that one moves across the state, kind of that similar bow shape that we saw in our event. And again, that one also had wind speeds in excess of 100 miles per hour with that event. So again, we see these are not absolutely unheard of, but these real high-end events are the ones, of course, that remain in your mind, forever. So I think, Chad, that's all I have. That's 30 minutes. The next slide, I think we go over to your information here. So I think we decided to do questions at the end. Unless anybody has any burning questions now, maybe we'll hold off and do those at the end.
Very good. Well, nice work, Mike. Looks like just looking through the question and answers, I don't see any there, but perhaps some more will come up here over the next little while. So maybe give folks some time to give some thought to that, and we'll get back in there as I talk through my section here. Kind of difficult to follow that one up, Mike, with talking about the derecho, but really taking it into my section, which the original request was to do a lot of talk about the National Weather Service services that are available, some of the specialized services that we provide, and of course derecho hit in between, and obviously that took precedent and had some pertinent information in there. But really kind of stepping back into the services that we provide, that we work all together for towards to try to prevent the loss of life, and certainly as and what we can do as far as protective actions when it comes to property. But this whiz-bang impact-based decision support services, right? We're a government agency, so we have to have acronyms for everything. It really boils down to customer service, and we try to separate and break up customer service and how we provide it to our core partners, which is largely the emergency management community. And we really kind of break that up into three different sections: the routine services that we typically provide to a large group of folks, typically the public, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. We talk about the impact-based decision support services for unplanned events or unplanned incidents, things like a hazmat tanker spill, fires, obviously weather response activities, unplanned incidents that we can't really plan and prep for. But one of the things that we've been really focused on lately has been the integrated into EOCs for planned events, and we'll talk about some of these as we walk through the presentation here. So the National Weather Service really has a layered service approach, and I think of it as a kind of a cake, a foundation of how we produce our forecasts through our traditional products, which primarily serve the public. Those include forecasts and warnings and social media stuff that's really disseminated to the large mass of folks. You go up in the cake, and kind of the specialized service goes to core partners, and those are enhanced services that we really tailor for our core partners, and we really try to work through the feedback mechanism in order to improve those and make them as great as they can be. And those can include the situation reports, which I'm sure a lot of you know all about. You probably get tired of them to some degree in your email, but they are important to pass along information, and it provides a great tap on the shoulder to our core partners. Remote incident event support, that can be a micron or a radio call to our office saying, hey, there's a fire in an apartment complex. What's the winds going to be for the next hour? Something as simple as that. And then NWS chat and INWS, I'll talk about those here in a little bit. You go up further on that cake and really drilling down to the emergency management partners that we have, and that really boils to the interpretive services that we can provide in higher level details of weather episodes, and those can be our enhanced webinars that we occasionally will run. It can be on-site support for big events. We have folks are at the EOCs, both at Iowa State football games and Iowa Hawkeye football games out there in Iowa or in Iowa City, and primarily to provide real-time weather support in the event that we have anything that impacts the area or a potential unforeseen incident in the area. That can include some HySPLIT, and we'll talk about what HySPLIT is here in a little bit. Some of you may be familiar with that, as well as some of the more specialized information, the contingency forecasts that we get off of our rivers, and some of the probabilistic information. Again, I'll mention that here going forward. So in that first batch, the routine IDSS, impact-based decision support services, the partner webinars and situation report briefings. They look a lot like this, at least out of our office here in Des Moines, and they look probably similar out of the adjacent offices that serve your area as well of the state. And we really try to boil down the specifics of what's going on for a particular high impact event. In this case, these both are severe weather briefings that we've produced to really try to enhance the knowledge that's going on for a particular weather event. Another thing that I mentioned for routine service is NWS chat. We can't say it enough. NWS chat is a great conduit, a great flow of information into the National Weather Service. We are in there along with our all of our integrated warning team partners, which include the emergency management community and dispatch, and our media partners as well, amongst others, including academia. And it's a really good way of two-way exchange of information. We always try to staff that desk to be able to monitor that in real time. I can go back to the derecho event, and that proved to be a challenge. It was a quick ramp up of what the expectations were that morning, which presented some challenges in maintaining the resources or having the resources on hand in time to be able to catch up to the needs. And I think of the ICS 300 class, where you have the demands of the demand curve and then the resources trying to catch up, and it's always a lag in order to do so, especially as we found out in a quickly ramp up like we did. But it's a great way to have this two-way exchange of information. And one thing that I will say is, with our dispatch friends, this is a great tool. We know that they're busy receiving 911 phone calls for a variety of emergency service requests, as well as the random person driving down the interstate that thinks they see a tornado. But what I would say is this is a good passive way to be able to relay that information back to the greater group to ensure that we complete the warning loop. What that warning loop means is, yeah, they could get a report through 911 of a tornado, and they could hit the button to sound the sirens. But if we don't close that loop and we don't receive that information back at the National Weather Service, we miss out on all the mobile apps. We miss out on the broadcasting on televisions and radio. So we lose a large portion of the warning dissemination platform when that loop doesn't get closed. So that was a shameless plug of why NWS chat is so very critical, but it's a great way to be able to relay information back and forth. There's also a mobile capability on it via the Taconaut app. It's not perfect, but it does offer some mobile capability when it comes to using NWS chat when you're mobile. Another service that we provide, and I would encourage folks to do it, is the INWS. It's called Interactive NWS Service. You can get it at that link there at the top of the screen. It is a texting and email service for specifically EMs and government partners only. It is 100% configurable, which makes it as a great tool of redundancy when it comes to warning notifications for your counties. There's a lot of possibilities, I would say, with this, but some that may include to also configure it to include upstream counties, so you know what's coming at you as far as warnings go. You can maybe use some email filters that do some automatic forwarding for warning information for your counties, which also can provide some redundancy into your warning operation. So if you want any more information about that, please feel free to reach out to me or anybody at the office that serves you. They would be happy to help you walk through that. It's pretty self-explanatory as well by going to that website there. Another routine service that we provide is our Micron briefings. The Micron, for those that are unaware, is the 8 counties across the center part of the state near the Des Moines metro area. We provide real-time briefings onto that. We have warning drops into our NAWAS warning points on the map over there on the right-hand side. And we're still in the evaluation period of a potential transition into the state ISIC system, which would open up some additional means of communication when it comes to reaching our counties in a real-time situation. So let's talk about this. The Weather Service, IDSS, the services that we provide for unplanned incidents, and the emergency response timeline really kind of looks like this. So on the left-hand side is the time of occurrence of the incident at 0 there on the bottom of the screen, and then we have just 3 to 10 minutes of the incident occurring, and it kind of goes through, and you can see on the slide from left to right of the need of weather information for weather-sensitive situations. And you can see the emergency responders by 3 minutes are in travel to the site. In this case, we're saying it's a release, a hazardous material release, and it's a good opportunity to start requesting weather information as folks kind of walk through this timeline. Some of you may be aware of the Cameo Aloha software. I'll talk about that briefly. It's kind of out of our lane a little bit, but I'll talk about that briefly on the next slide. But a good way to provide current weather conditions as you get set up on site. And then as we get going into it, you can start to think about running into the HySPLIT, the dispersion model, which we're able to provide a little bit more specific dissemination or dispersion information to the emergency responders. And then as the event unfolds, it's a good two-way information flow back and forth between the weather forecast office and the emergency responders in the field. The immediate thing, the first thing that we can do is a weather briefing. That is a very quick thing that we can do when emergency services are on way to provide for the incident. Very simple, closest to where this incident's at, we can provide wind speed and direction, sky conditions, current weather, as well as temperature and humidity, and we can do so very, very quickly. So whatever means that folks have to be able to reach their weather office, I would definitely encourage that in route. So another kind of continuation of the unplanned incidents, if it's a formal text product that you're interested in, we have that covered as well. The spot weather forecast at the link there in the middle of the slide, the weather.gov /spot, is a good way that you can go and submit a spot forecast request. Of course, don't want to be doing that if you're in emergency response mode, but maybe a dispatch or something behind the scenes could be in the process of providing that information and putting that request in. Turnaround time is generally about 10 to 15 minutes where the forecaster gets his hands on where that incident's at. It's also a good way to communicate and put it on both of our both of our radars, right? So we know that something's going on in a particular area. And then you can monitor it at the weather.gov/spot/monitor page to be able to see once it's completed by National Weather Service forecasters. This is generally reserved for prescribed burns and such, but it's also has a capacity for hazmats and search and rescues and things of that nature as well. So again, that's the text version. So I mentioned it earlier, the Cameo Aloha software. It's an umbrella of various software platforms, none of which the National Weather Service is really all that involved in. But know that they've been around for a long time. They're able to provide information off the internet to be able to get kind of the quick and dirty of what's going on in a particular hazardous material situation. And it can be for responses to various chemical emergencies, fertilizer plant explosions there in Louisiana, pretty much anything that deserves some sort of a immediate dispersion information. The Cameo suite provides. Again, the National Weather Service is not directly involved in the offline version of Cameo. What we are involved in, though, is the HySPLIT software. And the HySPLIT software is ran on a website that the Weather Service has access to, that we can go in and enter various information, where the site is, what the material is, what the timeline is as far as dispersion, and we can get a plume that we can provide as to where this chemical, this material that's being released is going. And so the advantage of HySPLIT versus Cameo is fantastic because it provides what the immediate responders need. The advantage, or the layer of support that HySPLIT provides, is that it integrates the weather models into the plume. So, for example, if there's a wind shift coming later in the day, and you're not going to get that on a Cameo run, you would get that on a HySPLIT run. Again, it's not in place of that. It just adds another layer of situational awareness to a dispersion situation. So for lack of witty words at the bottom, for a HySPLIT run, contact the NWS and be done. Every office can provide that, and I would encourage folks to be aware and request HySPLIT information if and when there's some sort of dispersion activity in your particular county. We can provide on-site deployment to the EOCs, as I mentioned earlier, as is the case at the Iowa State football and Iowa City football there in Iowa Hawkeyes. We also are down at the SEOC when activation occurs, both in person and virtually. And then some of you may remember Kelsey there in the lower left. He was down at Polk County during the floods of 2018 to provide the real-time direct weather support to decision makers. It's been somewhat, maybe a little bit challenging for a variety of reasons, a couple of reasons in the COVID era with this. We can still provide on-site support, but of course virtual exploration is okay as well to limit exposure. And we've been working, at least locally here, with Iowa State via WebEx, their platform. Whatever the video share platform is, we can jump on and be able to provide the virtual support if it's large enough where we can be on site as well during this. Requests are evaluated based on our resources at each office, and it's very case by case, but can be done by calling the National Weather Service office that serves your county or area of jurisdiction. Mentioned this, not going to go through it again, but large events do have constant weather support is required. We can send some folks out there to be able to plug into an EOC. For planned events, those can come through the warning coordination meteorologist of your office that serves you, and we can get that set up. Again, it's going to be somewhat availability will be based on resources on a case-by-case basis. But something to keep in mind as we have bigger events, hopefully once COVID ends or goes away, which can't be soon enough. I'm sure you guys share in that feeling. Hopefully we can get some of these events back up and going again. You guys probably know a little bit about this, the weather, the event support that we provide, submissions for to provide real-time remote daily weather briefings and on-demand phone calls. They can be requested by that website at the bottom of the screen, weather.gov/your office/event support. And really what this does for us, it's kind of a two-way street, but it gets events that we may not already know onto our radar. And that's kind of pun intended, but we don't know some of these events that are going that may have congregations of people that are in harm's way. You know, we're fortunate to some degree that the derecho occurred on a year that we didn't have the fair and a lot of events going on outside. It was a Monday morning, which was probably the best case scenario. Think if it's a Saturday night and you have county fairs ongoing or something, and we have something like this go through. Derechos are fairly common late night, early morning, but even so, we have some vulnerabilities that exist out there with people that are in places that we don't have a lot of shelter. So weather.gov/your-office/event support. Get it on our radar. That way we know what's going on. A couple other slides that we have here before we open it up if there's any questions. The first one, StormReady. You guys have probably heard us beat this for the last decade or two. 49 of the 99 counties in Iowa are StormReady currently. We definitely want folks, I'd love to have 100%, frankly, in this. There's a lot to gain by being StormReady. Least of which is the process of actually doing it. We really build relationships out of doing StormReady. It ensures there's redundancy in the reception of warnings at both the dispatch and the emergency operations center of your counties. It ensures that there's means of dissemination. It really just builds and kind of really focuses on the relationship between the weather office and the county EMA and county dispatch. As you guys know, we couldn't do what we do without the help of our partners, and we'd like to feel the same from our end. So the more that we can tighten that partnership through programs like StormReady, the better off the warning system will be, and as a result, the safer our residents of Iowa will be. Weather Ready Nation ambassadors. It is a community preparedness engagement initiative that we have, and it's nothing more than, again, trying to build out that layer of weather preparedness into different areas of our communities, places like hospitals and libraries and radio stations, civic organizations, anything that really have any group that has a vested interest in weather preparedness. We encourage to have them sign up in your county. And it's not fancy, but at the website there, you can click on there. Folks can go in there and enter their preparedness, their information. We pull that into our office, and we can send out periodic kind of taps on the shoulder of preparedness, seasonal campaigns, and things like that. We don't provide specialized service that we do like we do to the EMA partners, but we provide some good preparedness material that can hopefully help some of those groups stay a little bit safer as we go through the hazardous weather. And then finally, before we get to questions here, just a reminder for the 2020 and 2021 season, snow squall warnings will alert on the WIA. So just like tornado and flash flood warnings, the snow squall warnings will alert on the wireless emergency alerts. They did last year too, but there was very few issued. In fact, we did not issue any out of the Des Moines office. I think that the Quad Cities issued one, maybe a few out east, and maybe Sioux Falls may have as well. The WIA 2.0 allows for 360 characters, so anything that activates the wireless emergency alerts, you'll get more information than maybe you were receiving in the past. One follow-up to that, there was ironically, the period of response and feedback to include severe thunderstorm warnings on the wireless emergency alerts was on July 31st, 10 days before the derecho. So long story short, I think we'll see how this evolves, but there is a possibility that that severe thunderstorm warnings will also alert on the wireless emergency alert system in time. More to come on that in the following months. And then also new for the winter this year, we're experimenting with a probabilistic snow forecast project here in the Midwest. We're trying ways to capture the range of possibilities that we have in our forecast. And of course, as we see, you guys know as well as we do, every event has a range of possibilities. We're trying to find ways to communicate various things like the probability of exceedance. So what's the percentage of chance that this storm will give us greater than 6 inches of snow, and trying to build that into our operation. So bottom line is just an introduction, and more to follow on that project in the coming weeks and months from our offices. So with that, I think I'm got a few minutes left here. John, is there any questions that anyone have for either Mike or myself?
Chad and Mike, I'm not sure if you see those questions in the Q&A, and I don't know if you've addressed them yet either. I had to step out in the middle of the presentation for a technical issue, but if you haven't answered those, if you wouldn't mind taking a look at those Q&As.
I don't have an answer for the hurricane warning flags. I don't know where that would be. Obviously, that could be in just an ingest question. I don't have that answer. And then Dennis Moreland asked, how much advance warning did the more eastern counties have that this storm was coming? Mike, do you want to take that one, or I can? Either way.
Yeah, Chad, I can take that. I have some of the statistics here. As mentioned earlier, this was one of the events that really evolved rapidly. It intensified rapidly. We're looking back. We're actually doing some active research to try to improve the lead time to get you more notice for these sort of events. I did look back. The watch on that day, the severe thunderstorm watch that would have kind of encompassed most of the western portion of Iowa, was issued at 8:55 a.m. And then the watch that was issued further to the west there, I believe, was issued I think around 11 a.m. And the storm again hit the Cedar Rapids area about 1. So the bottom line is the western counties, you may not have had much notice, probably the typical warning time notice, 20, 30 minutes. And our goal is obviously to give you more prep time for that. The counties in the east, so you get, once the storm really made it through the Des Moines metro, all those counties in the east kind of knew what they were in for. And we did reach out, and we made some personal phone calls even for the counties upstream from there. But even so, they probably only had a couple hours of lead time before the storms hit, because again, it was moving at 50 to 60 miles per hour. It was moving fast, and we knew it wasn't just going to go ahead and diminish. Once these systems get going, they don't just quit. So yeah, the bottom line is when people woke up that morning, we did not have a high risk of severe weather. And that's an area we're working with the Storm Prediction Center. We're trying to find ways. So when you wake up early that morning, you can say, hey, there's a risk of severe weather today. And in that case, there wasn't a lot of additional lead time. Just being frank, perfectly honest. We're trying to improve, but the state of the science is sometimes we aren't always going to know. So we're going to try to explore, like Chad said, these other options to kind of ring your bell if we feel it's necessary. So we're always looking for better ways to do that. So hopefully that answers the question, Dennis. And the hurricane warning flag, Chad, I don't have an answer for that either. Going back to maybe go down to Florida and see if you can find one. I'm sure the surf shops have them down there. That would be my guess. Take a vacation and buy one on the Gulf Coast. Maybe that's where the people are going. Maybe we need to come up with a derecho flag or something. I don't know.
Well, thank you both for the time today. I know we're at an hour. If we see a question come in here in the next couple minutes, fine. But otherwise, thanks again for the presentation.